on not being in an engagement, especially because he had lost a great uncle during the Civil War. This is Bill's father, Gilman. Gilman remarried also. He is buried here. Actually, he was cremated, as was his second wife, Christine Wilson. Bill did reconcile with his dad. He didn't get to see him a lot, but his father died in 1954. And then this is Blake Barrows and Betsy Cochran. So it was Betsy's uncle. I believe it was her uncle is the one who built the Wilson House in 1852. And Ira Cochran, who's actually just down the way here. And Ira sold the house to Betsy and Blake, and they ran it as East Dorset Hotel. Then Blake and William C. Wilson partnered up in around 1870, and it was called the Barrows and Wilson House. And then in 1877, William C. and his wife bought them out, and it became the Wilson House. Get all that? It will not be a quiz. And last but not least, we're going to go up here, which I think is a really important stone. And a lot of people don't even know he's here. A few people definitely know his significance to all of us. And this is Bill's brother, Dr. Leonard Strong, and Bill's sister Dorothy are buried there. Of course, Leonard Strong was Bill's last friend, as he wrote. And he's the one who introduced Bill to Dr. Silkworth. He paid for all three of Bill's stays at Towns Hospital. And of course, the third time it stuck, and we're all here. Leonard was also the first, he was a non-alcoholic member of the Alcoholic Foundation, which became the GSO, and was, involved with the structure of AA as it continued to grow for decades. And Dr. Strong was also played an instrumental role in setting up the Rockefeller dinner, and just so many, there's kind of a laundry list of the reasons why Leonard is so important to AA, the fellowship, and to Bill personally, and to me, because, without all these people that you see, we probably wouldn't be here, which, makes it all very real and really important for us all to remember. So if you get a chance to come here, it is by all means important to say hello to Bill and to Lois, but, to give a little nod to the family and certainly come up here and give your respects to Dr. Strong. So hope you make it soon.
So thank you for watching that. As I said, there's a lot of history here in East Dorset, and Sean is our expert. When you come visit us, I will call Sean. Just ask ahead of time. I'll call Sean and I'll say, Sean, come over. We have very important out-of-town guests, friends of Ray, friends of Ira, and friends of Bill coming to visit. And I'll ask Sean, if you're one of these people who's into this history, I'll ask Sean to come meet you here at the Wilson House and give you a little bit of history here at the house. And I'll say too, I'm actually upstairs in the above the meeting room right now, and there's 80 people in the meeting below me, and it's wonderful. It's an incredible meeting. It's a big book meeting, and people are here from all over the country, and it's like it's just the energy's palpable. So that's why I'm not walking around the house or showing you the house, is because we actually have a full house of guests, and the meeting. We just served dinner to all 80 of those people. I made salmon and chicken and a quinoa rice blend and some lentil salad that I made. So I don't know. We have like a minute if anybody has any questions.
Hi, Kim. Last week, somebody had mentioned how you guys have Zoom meetings there. Can you put either a link or how we could find what those meetings are in the chat?
Yes, the only Zoom meeting that we have that is actually pre-scheduled now is our gratitude meeting that we do after, it's like around Thanksgiving, and it's on Bill's birthday. So you know, the best thing to do would be to sign up for our e-newsletter by going to wilsonhouse.org, because I don't have the details for that one yet. We usually plan that in August, and then we send out an email, and you know, it's just it's a special Zoom meeting with a really good speaker. Last year we had John T from California, and we had hundreds of people on the meeting, and we broadcast it from our meeting room. But that's the only one that I know of. Anybody else? Okay, well, that's enough out of me. Thank you so much. And you can reach out anytime at kim@wilsonhouse.org if you have any, you know, questions for me. And thanks. I'll turn it over to Ray and Ira in the room.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ray and I'm an alcoholic. Thank you all for coming. Last week, I think I stopped on page at the bottom of 49, actually. But one thing I want to mention about page 49, I think we covered this, but I'm going to just touch on it a minute here. In the middle of 49, the first full paragraph says, instead of regarding ourselves as intelligent agents, spearheads of God's ever-advancing creation, we agnostics and atheists chose to believe that our human intelligence was the last word, the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and end of all. Rather vain of us, wasn't it? And think of what he's saying. The microphone's not on. Thank you, Bill. Hello? Hello? Is it on now? Hello?
I can hear you,
Can you
but
guys
maybe
hear
you
me
could
in
move
there?
closer.
Fine, Ray, we can hear you.
Hear you.
I can hear you, Ray.
Is that better? Can
Yeah,
you guys hear me? Not me. How about now? Better now? All right. Okay, I got into the book too soon. I got to do this prayer before I get into the book. So I'm going to read the set aside prayer. Thank you, Bill. Dear God, please set aside everything I think I know about myself, this book, my disease, these steps, and especially about you, dear God, so that I might have an open mind and a new experience with all these things. Please help me to see the truth. Okay. Now, I'm going to read that again. Instead of, I'm 49, the first full paragraph, instead of regarding ourselves as intelligent agents. Now, why wouldn't we regard ourselves as intelligent agents? If I'm God's agent, he's going to give me power. When you're an agent for somebody, they empower you to represent them. You know, wouldn't we want that power? Especially when we're powerless. So, spearheads of God's ever-advancing creation, we agnostics and atheists chose to believe that our human intelligence was the last word, the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and end of all. Rather vain of us, wasn't it? So he says one more time, we who have traveled this dubious path beg you to lay aside prejudice. So prejudice is a preconceived idea not based in fact, usually erroneous, you know, and he uses this word 7 times in this chapter. So what he's trying to say is how prejudiced we were against God and religion. And if you remember last week, I told you about, there's a lot of sentences in this particular chapter where there's capitalized words in the middle of a sentence. He's given us ideas, different concepts that we can use or not use to find out what our concept of God is. Because for me, I got here a non-believer. There's no way I'm going to turn my will and my life over to a punishing God, not a guy that lived the way I did. You know, and my sponsor said to me, what characteristics do you want your God to have? And I told him, I said, well, I want him to be loving and forgiving. He said, anything else? I said, not right now. And he said, okay, when you pray to a loving, forgiving God. And that's what I started doing. But that punishing God thing was just not going to work for me. So now I'm going over to page 50. And we covered that top part. I'm going to go down to, so the other thing I want to say is, this is a process. A process, I'm going to give you the Webster process, a continuing development involving many changes, a method of doing something with all the steps involved. That's out of Webster. That isn't about, they're not talking about our step. They're saying in a process, there's steps. And if you remember, step 2 says, came to believe. You know, I can't tell you when I came to believe, but I can tell you sometime going through this process of this stuff with these old timers, at some point, I came to believe. I didn't even know I had. I just had, because my life was changing and things were definitely getting better. And so I'm going to read the second full paragraph on 50 says, on one proposition, however, these men and women are strikingly agreed. Every one of them has gained access to and believes in a power greater than himself. And I don't think it's a mistake that it says access to before believes in. I was such a non-believer, but I loved these old timers and I loved how they were showing me stuff and doing stuff with me. And that gave me access to believe in that God. Does that make any sense? You know, they started to open my mind by me caring about them and realizing that they were positive forces in my life. So my mind started to open a little bit and soften a little bit with all that prejudice I had towards religion and God. This power has in each case accomplished the miraculous, the humanly impossible. As a celebrated American statesman put it, let's look at the record. And here he's going to give us the record. Here are thousands of men and women, worldly indeed. They flatly declare that since they have come to believe in a power greater than themselves, to take a certain, first up, believe in a power greater than themselves. Step 2, to take a certain attitude towards that power. Step 2, and to do certain simple things, the 12 steps. There has been a revolutionary change in their way of living and thinking. In the face of collapse and despair, in the face of the total failure of their human resources, they found that a new power, peace, happiness, and sense of direction flowed into them. There's promises right there. This happened soon after they wholeheartedly met a few simple requirements. And we just talked about those requirements. Once confused and baffled by the seeming futility of existence, they showed the underlying reasons why they were making heavy going of life. Leaving aside the drink question, forget about our drinking. They tell why life was so unsatisfactory. Life was unsatisfactory before I ever started drinking. That's why I started drinking. They show how the change came over them when many hundreds of people are able to say that the consciousness of the presence of God is today the most important fact of their lives. They present a powerful reason why one should have faith. Does all of that make sense to everyone? So, and you know, this process, I'm going to go clear back to page 12. And that's in Bill's story. And the fourth paragraph that starts out in italics says it was only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Nothing more was required for me to make my beginning. I saw that growth could start from that point. The minute I become willing, the process starts. And I can start to, he says, upon a foundation of complete willingness, I might build what I saw in my friend, what he saw in Ebby. He sees this miraculous thing. Ebby's sober. He can't even believe Ebby's sober. But he can see that he's going to build this spiritual structure that we've been talking about. Let's go to page 46. The first full paragraph. Yes, we of agnostic temperament have had these thoughts and experiences. Let us make haste to reassure you. We found that as soon as we were able to lay aside prejudice and express even a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves, we commenced to get results. We're starting to get results. We just read on page 12, he saw he could build this thing and have this thing that Ebby have, and now we're getting results. And let's turn to page 75. On 75, the second full paragraph says, we pocket our pride and go to it, illuminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. Once we have taken this step, withholding nothing, we are delighted. We can look the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. Our fears fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. Do you see how the process is gaining motion? You know, I was getting results back in the last thing. Now I'm beginning to have a spiritual experience. So this is a process, and that's what we got to think of it as, a process. I don't know when this will happen for you guys, but I know it will happen because I've never seen it not happen if we go through the process. And leaving aside the drink question, you know, we're going to turn over right now to page 52. And that's where the bedevilments are. So let's look at, and this is the unmanageability of our lives. So we're looking at the second paragraph and the second sentence. Ray was having trouble with personal relationships. Ray couldn't control his emotional nature. Ray was prey to misery and depression. Ray couldn't make a living. He had a feeling of uselessness. He was full of fear. He was unhappy. He couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. That was all before I ever took a drink. And if you remember in the doctor's opinion, he said we were restless, irritable, and discontent. I wasn't comfortable in my own skin. And the first time I ever drank, that sense of ease and comfort came over me that I had never had before. I wasn't drinking the alcohol because I loved alcohol. I wasn't drinking the alcohol to get high. I was drinking to not feel dis-ease or discomfort. And that was the effect of alcohol. And whenever I had that not comfortable with my own skin or whatever, I wanted a drink. Let's turn to page 64 a minute. So we just read those bedevilments. And let's look at, so what's the first way that self shows up in us? Resentments. And he says, the third full paragraph, resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From it stem all forms of spiritual disease. From it, meaning from resentments, stem all forms of spiritual disease. Why does spiritual disease, does resentment kick that off? Because when I'm in resentment, I've shut God out of my life. There's no chance for him to be in my life. I'm angry. So do you see how all of what we're talking about relates to each of the other things? Now I'm going back to page 52. Third paragraph. When I saw others solve their problems by a simple reliance upon the spirit of the universe, we had to stop doubting the power of God. My ideas did not work, but the God idea did. Now let's go over to the middle of 53. When I became alcoholic, crushed by a self-imposed crisis I could not postpone or evade. The crisis was I was powerless. I had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or else he is nothing. God either is or he isn't. What was my choice to be? This is the step 2 proposition. Now, at times, when you see this, it's hard to, my sponsor said, what's your choice to be? Well, I certainly didn't want it to be nothing. And I had made it all the way to page 53 here. He had taken me through all the book. And so I got to say he's everything. Now, at the time, what I didn't realize was the truth is I turned my alcohol problem over to God. But I didn't turn anything else over to him, really. It took me a while to realize that. But I'll give you an example of what happened to me at that time of my life. Not that time, this came actually after this. And I didn't realize when it happened, what had happened in my life. But in 1983, I'm talking to my sponsor one day on the telephone. And he says to me, Ray, are you doing a show right now? And I said, no, I'm not. And he said, do you have one coming up? And I said, not that I know of. And I made the mistake of saying to him, a guy called earlier this morning and offered me a show, but I'm not going to do it. And he said, when we get off this phone, I want you to call that producer back and tell him you'll do that show. And after I got off the phone with him, I called the producer back and I said, is that show still available? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, I'd love to do it. And I went over to Hawaii and did the show Magnum PI. I did it for 5 years. Now, I didn't, at the time that happened, I didn't see what I'm going to share with you now that I've learned how to look at that. Why did I not want to go? Because my whole support system, my sponsor and my whole support system in AA is based in the North Hollywood group at Radford. I don't want to go to some new block and have to earn my stripes all over again, man. I'm comfortable here. And I don't know what this is going to be for me. I don't know anybody over there. But what I couldn't see, just before this event happened with my sponsor, a girl from Radford had gone to Texas and spoke at a convention. She was a Saturday night speaker. And she called me when she got back and she said, "Hey, Ray, I'm going to be at LAX at such amount of time tomorrow. Will you come pick me up and bring me home?" And I said, "Yeah." And I went and picked her up and I'm driving her home. And on the way home, she says, "Hey, they gave me a gift for speaking. And it's this set of tapes." And she hands me a little box with six or seven cassettes in it. And they were Joe and Charlie. I never heard of Joe and Charlie. They were Joe and Charlie, and it was called The Big Book Comes Alive. And she gave them to me because she knew I really loved the book. So I said, "Well, thank you very much." And not a couple months after that, I'm headed to Hawaii. And all I have is me, God, and that set of tapes. And I didn't know this at the time, but not long after I was there, I spoke at a hospital meeting and some guy asked me to sponsor him. And then I spoke at another hospital meeting and some guy asked me to sponsor him. And now every week, there's those two guys, myself, and two other guys joined us. And 5 of us would have a meeting in my condo right below Diamond Head. And we'd put the tape machine right in the midst of all of us and start to play a tape. And I said, anytime if you want to stop the tape and you have a question or you want to comment or whatever, do it. We did that. Those 5 of us did that for the next 8 months together. And we went through all those tapes. And what I'm trying to say to you is, so this thing was really an opportunity for me. God's given me an opportunity. And I'm saying, no, I'm comfortable right here. Thank you. I don't want to go to Hawaii. But because of sponsor direction, because I already told you I turned the show down, I end up going to Hawaii and doing the show. And I can't tell you what all it did for me. And number one, I still sponsor a doctor over there he was one of those guys listening to that set of tapes. And I don't know, he's got 36 or 7 years, something like that. But it opened a new avenue to me. You know, I was always the type of guy that I get very comfortable in my own environment, and I don't want to go someplace new and do it. AA opened up the whole world to me because I've never felt not at home since that time anywhere I ever went. So sometimes we don't see how God works in our life, and I didn't see that at that time. A few years later, I realized, wow, what an opportunity, and I was going to blow it. Based on self-will, I was going to blow that opportunity because I was not going to go do that. So it's just strange the way some of this stuff works. But if your mind opens and you continue on this process, I'm telling you, you won't believe what will happen for you. So let's turn over to page 54. First full paragraph. I found too that I had been a worshiper. What does that mean? I worshiped alcohol. I worshiped money. I worshiped women. I'm going to give my will and life to those things, but I'm not giving it to God. Don't you even talk to me about that. But I gave my will and life to alcohol. I gave it to women. I gave it to money. I gave it to prestige. And I never could see those things till my sponsor helped me see those. But it's amazing what went on in my life, and I wasn't even aware of any. You know, and you think, my God, how sick can one guy get? You know, but he says, so I'm going over to 55 now. Second full paragraph. Actually, Ray was fooling himself, for deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. It may be obscured by calamity, by pomp, by worship of other things, but in some form or other, it was there. All those things I just read blocked me off from God. For faith in a power greater than myself and miraculous demonstrations of that power in human lives are facts as old as Ray himself. I finally saw that faith in some kind of God was a part of my makeup just as much as the feeling I have for a friend. Sometimes. Now, if you remember earlier, he told us how and where we were going to find God. Here's how. Sometimes I had to search fearlessly, but he was there. He was as much a fact as I was. And here's where I found the great reality deep down within Ray. In the last analysis, it is only there that God may be found. It was so with me. I thought I had to go to the church or go to the Bible to find God. No, I had to search diligently within me. You know, one day I made the mistake of saying to my sponsor, in my heart, I knew I was wrong. He said, did it ever dawn on you that that's God? No, it never had until he said it. And I went, oh my God. Now, that next paragraph. We can only clear the ground a bit if our testimony helps sweep away prejudice, enables you to think honestly, encourages you to search diligently within yourself. Then, if you wish, you can join us on the broad highway. With this attitude, you cannot fail. The consciousness of your belief is sure to come to you. The consciousness of my belief at this time is God is everything. Let's turn to page 86 a minute. So we're in step 11. You know what I'm going to do, you guys? I'm sorry, but I got to go to the men's room. I'll be right back.
You say 87?
86.
Thank you. You muted it, Ira.
All right. So I'm page 86. Actually, let's go to the bottom of 85. He says, step 11 suggests prayer and meditation. We shouldn't be shy on this matter of prayer. Better men than we are using it constantly. It works if we have the proper attitude and work at it. We just read what the proper attitude was on page 55. right? With this attitude, I cannot fail. That's amazing. Now comes the part you've all been waiting for. Chapter 5. Let's go over to page 58. You guys, I'm going to start at rarely have we seen a person fail. You read your books. I'm reading an original manuscript. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our directions. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. In 46 and a half years, I have not met a cannot. I've met a zillion will nots, but not a cannot. Does that make sense to you folks? There are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a way of life which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those too who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to follow directions. At some of these, you may balk. You may think you can find an easier, softer way. We doubt if you can. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us had tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you have decided you want it, what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to follow directions. See how he changed how he originally wrote it? I mean, to me, it makes more sense to follow the directions than the way that we have it today. Then he says, now I'm going back to the book. At some of these, we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. Remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for us. But there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. An old timer really helped me through this part of the book. And I'm going to tell you what he said to me. He said, Ray, now isn't when, it's where. I had never been where you saw me in my life, because I was always up here. And I was into tomorrow's fear or yesterday's regret. I was never in the now. And he told me now is the only place God is at, Ray. And if you want his help, I suggest you be where he is. Then it says, half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. The turning point is, I'm either going with that God that's everything, or I'm going back towards my disease. Ray asked God's protection and care with complete abandon. Now, I'm not going to read you the steps because you all know what the steps are, but I am going to read one step to you, and it's the 12th step. And this is from the original manuscript again. Having had a spiritual experience as the result of this course of action, we tried to carry this message to others, especially alcoholics, and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Especially alcohol. That means they carried the message to people that weren't. I took a man over at Mission Hills Country Club, the head golf pro. I was taking lessons from him, and we're talking, and he was somehow got to talking to me about some problems he was having, and he was not alcoholic. And we're talking, and one day he says to me, "What are you, a therapist?" I said, "No, I'm a drunk." He said, "What?" And I said, "I'm a drunk. I'm not a therapist." He said, "Well, where'd you learn all that stuff we're talking about?" Anyways, he expressed a desire to know about, I said, "Would you be willing to do some stuff?" He wanted to change. He said, "You've really helped me, and I would think you can help me more." So he wrote an inventory. He did a 5th step with me. I was the only guy from the club that was invited to his wedding when he got married. And he's not at the club anymore. He's a head pro at another one, but he still calls me. And every once in a while, he'll call and say, "Do you have time for a cup of coffee?" I know what that means. So we have coffee together. But I'm saying this to you because if you remember when we read in this book, in the foreword of the first edition, he says, "And besides, we are sure that our way of living has its advantages for all." This man happened to have an alcoholic father back in Ohio. And when he was 14 years old, the only way he could see his father is to go in a bar and visit his dad. And so he loved the program. He loved the steps. Like I say, I took him through the steps. It made total sense to him. You know, remember, I told you it was only the first part of the book so far that's talked about alcohol. The rest of it talks about other stuff. So let's go back to page 60 now. After the steps, many of us exclaim, "What an order! I can't go through with it." Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is that we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. He's talking about this process now that we were talking about in this meeting. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Our description of the alcoholic, which was the doctor's opinion, the chapter and Bill's story in 2 and 3, the chapter to the agnostic, chapter 4, and our personal adventures before when I was drinking and after when I got sober, make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A, that I was alcoholic and could not manage my own life. Step 1. B, that probably no human power could have relieved my alcoholism. Step 1. C, that God could and would if he were sought. Step 2. Being convinced, I was at step 3, which is that I decided to turn my will and my life over to God as I understood him. Just what do we mean by that? And just what do we do? So now they're going to explain that to us. And it says the first requirement. So there's a requirement for me to take step 3. The first requirement is that I be convinced that Ray's life run on Ray's will can hardly be a success. On that basis, I am almost always in collision with something or somebody, even if my motives are good. I'd get in a fight with my wife, I'd send her a dozen roses. Nice guy, huh? No, I wanted to get back in the bedroom. My motives, I can't even trust my motives. Most people try to live by self-propulsion. He doesn't say most alcoholic people, he says most people. Self-propulsion is self-will. Each person is like an actor who wants to run the whole show, is forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballet, and the scenery, and the rest of the players in his own way. That's me. Now, I just happen to have worked in the motion picture business, and I can tell you right now, the actor doesn't run the show. Right? I'm going to read this the way I was taught to. If Ray's arrangements would only stay put, if only people would do as Ray wished, the show would be great. Everybody, including Ray, would be pleased. Life would be wonderful. In trying to make these arrangements, Ray may sometimes be quite virtuous. He may be kind, considerate, patient, generous, even modest and self-sacrificing. On the other hand, Ray may be mean, egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. But as with most humans, Ray is more likely to have varied traits. What usually happens? The show doesn't come off very well. Ray begins to think life doesn't treat him right. Oh, here comes the victim again. Ray decides to exert himself more. He becomes, on the next occasion, still more demanding or gracious, as the case may be. Still, the play does not suit Ray. Admitting he may be a little tiny bit at fault, he is sure that other people are more to blame. He becomes angry, indignant, self-pitying. What is Ray's basic trouble? Is he not really a self-seeker even when trying to be kind? Is Ray not a victim of the delusion that he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if he only manages well? Is it not evident to all the rest of the players that these are the things Ray wants? And do not his actions make each of them wish to retaliate, snatching all they can get out of the show? Is he not, even in his best moments, a producer of confusion rather than harmony? That's what I was like. And I want you to know, when I was like this, I wasn't always aware that I was like this. But believe me, I was like this. Let's turn over to 62. Selfishness, self-centeredness. That, I think, is the root of Ray's troubles. Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity, I step on the toes of my fellows and they retaliate. You see all the self in here? Sometimes they hurt me seemingly without provocation, but I invariably find that at some time in the past, I have made decisions based on Ray, which later placed me in a position to be hurt. So my troubles, I think, are basically of my own making. They arise out of self. And the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. Above everything, I must be rid of this selfishness. I must, or it kills me. That's a pretty heavy-duty statement. God makes that possible, and there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of Ray without God's aid. Many of us had moral and philosophical convictions galore, but I couldn't live up to them even though I would have liked to. Neither could I reduce my self-centeredness much by wishing or trying on my own power. I had to have God's help. Self cannot get rid of self. This is the how and why of it. Here's how. First of all, I had to quit playing God. And here's why. It didn't work. Next, I decided that hereafter in this drama of life, God was going to be my director. The director is the guy, it's his show. It's his interpretation of that script. And he's the one that he arranges the lights, the balance, he arranges everything, and he tells the actor, here's the way I want you to portray this character. So God's going to be the director and Ray's going to be the actor. God's going to be the principal. The principal is the top man. Ray's going to be his agent. And we already found out that God's going to empower me if I'm his agent. He's going to give me power. God is the father and Ray is his child. What's a father do for a child? He provides for him. He takes care of him. Most good ideas are simple, and this concept was the keystone of the new and triumphant arch through which I passed to freedom. Remember we read about all the stones? And I'm built, now my spiritual structure is built. The keystone is I've got the spiritual structure. That's my decision. But I don't complete my decision till I complete step 9, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's how I turn my life over to my will and my life over to God, by doing those next 5 steps. 6 steps, excuse me. Now let's look at the top of 63. When I sincerely took such a position, what position? I'm not playing God anymore. All sorts of remarkable things followed. Here comes the promises. Ray had a new employer. You notice the E is capitalized. Being all powerful, God provided what Ray needed if Ray kept close to him, father, child, and performed his work well. Principal agent. Established on such a footing, I became less and less interested in myself, my little plans and designs. More and more, I became interested in seeing what I could contribute to life. As I felt new power flow in, there's a heck of a promise. As I enjoyed peace of mind, as I discovered I could face life successfully, as I became conscious of God's presence, I began to lose my fear of today, tomorrow, or the hereafter. Before I read the last 3 words, I'm going to skip till the first sentence right after the prayer. Ray thought well before taking this step, making sure he was ready that he could at last abandon Ray Jeffers utterly to God. What's that mean? I'm turning over my ego to God. And I'm going up to the last 3 words now at the end of that first paragraph. Ray was reborn. So I have a new father. My story, I don't have to even remember my story anymore. It's not a part of me. All this stuff that we've been reading about it. Let's look at the prayer for a minute. This prayer has 3 ideas in it. First idea, God, I offer myself to thee. To build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Second idea, relieve me of the bondage of self that I may better do thy will. Third idea, take away my difficulties that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. Do you notice there's no amen after this prayer? There isn't an amen till after the seventh step prayer, because that's how they used to do it. This flowed right through. You didn't wait 3 months before you took the next thing, the next step. And then he says, we found it very desirable to take this spiritual step with an understanding person such as our wife, best friend, or spiritual advisor. But it is better to meet God alone than with one who might misunderstand. The wording was, of course, quite optional so long as it expressed those ideas, voicing it without reservation. This was only a beginning, though if honestly and humbly made, an effect, sometimes a very great one, was felt at once. Now I'm going to refer to the third step in the 12 and 12, because I want to read you one line on page 34 in step 3 in the 12 and 12, down towards the bottom of the page. It says, in fact, the effectiveness of the whole AA program will rest upon how well and earnestly I have tried to come to a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand them. It doesn't say that about any other step. In other words, remember that keystone holds all the rest of the stones in the arch? Step 3 holds all the rest of the steps that I'm going to do together. Does that make sense? It's just powerful.
Could you talk about dependence on God others differently than belief in God?
My only dependency can be only on God.
Yes.
That's what they're trying to, that God is everything or else he's nothing. And that's what I'm saying. When I went over and I did that show in Hawaii, I had to lose all those faulty dependencies I had on all those people that were supporting me. And I had to rely on God, the book, and those tapes. And it taught me a very valuable lesson. It doesn't mean I don't enjoy the support in that group, but it means I can get by without them if I'm willing to rely on my higher power. He just said he's going to provide what I need if I kept close to him and perform his work well. That was 1983, 4, 5, 6, 7. How many years ago was that? I've not needed that stuff. I've had God in my life ever since then. I lived right below Diamond Head, right on the beach. I had a key to my beach. You couldn't come to my beach if you didn't have the key. I mean, that's how beautiful and nice it was. And I sat there every morning and watched the sun come up. And if you think I didn't get close to God, I was living alone. I was alone at that time. And I'm telling you, we don't need everything we think we need. But like I said, you have to search diligently within you. That's where I found that power. Chuck Chamberlain used to say all the time, the reason we can't find God is we're looking in the wrong place. He said, what we're looking for, we're looking with. Because I'm looking out here to be okay. I'm never looking in here to be okay. Does that make any sense? Chuck lived in Laguna Beach, and he had a beautiful home, and he had a big bay window that looked right at the beach. And one time I was lucky enough to go with Mike Ross, who was speaking at the Laguna Women's Club Wednesday night meeting, which was Chuck Chamberlain's home group. And I got to have dinner with Chuck and Elsa and Mike and myself. And Chuck shows me the window and he says, see how the light comes through that window and lights up the whole room? I said, yeah. He said, I look at that light as God. He said, but when the drape's drawn, the light doesn't come in. He said, I look at that drape as my ego. And my job is to keep the drape out of God's way so God's light can get in. And that's what they're trying to say to us, what we just read in these couple of pages. I got to get me out of the way so God can do his work. Does that make any sense? And when you're in your head, you're in your ego because you're running the show. So I can't do that. Or I'm going to get the same result I got when I turned to alcohol. Does that make any sense?
Yes.
Okay. So he says, this was only a beginning, though if honestly and humbly made, an effect sometimes a very great one was felt at once. I'm reading right at the bottom of the prayer there, bottom page 63. Now it says, next we launched out on a course of vigorous action, the first step of which is a personal house cleaning, which many of us had never attempted. Though my decision, step 3, was a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things in myself which had been blocking me. My liquor was but a symptom. My liquor was not the problem, it was the symptom. So I had to get down to causes and conditions. Therefore, I started on a personal inventory. This was step 4. A business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. I guess that means we take more than one inventory, huh? Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding and fact-facing process. It is an effort to discover the truth about the stock in trade. I'm the stock in trade. One object is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods, to get rid of them promptly and without regret. If the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. I did exactly the same thing with my life. I took stock honestly. First, I searched out the flaws in my makeup, which caused my failure. Being convinced that self, manifested in various ways, was what had defeated me, I considered its common manifestations. So I'm what defeated me. Resentment is the #1 offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. Surely that must be a misprint. It must be alcohol, right? Wrong. He doesn't say that. He says it's resentments that kill me. From resentment stem all forms of spiritual disease. For I have been not only mentally, my obsession in thinking, and physically, my allergy ill, I have been spiritually sick. When the spiritual malady is overcome, I straighten out mentally and physically. I don't have to work on my mental. I don't have to work on my physical. All I have to work on is my spiritual. And at the bottom of page 14, we read, for if an alcoholic fails to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. So I got to work on that spiritual malady or I'm not getting recovery. In dealing with resentments, now here comes, remember we read further on, there's clear-cut directions, here they come. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. We listed people, places. I'm sorry, people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry. So that's my first direction. And before I go on, that's what I do. I list the people, the institutions. Marriage is an institution, you guys. So's the IRS. and principles. I don't like the principle of honesty. I have to be accountable if I like that principle. I don't like that. But there's principles. So we're going to list. There's 3 things involved in that list: the people, the institutions, and the principles. Now, that's my first thing. And I make that list. I complete that first column before I go to the second column. All right. I think I'm out of time, aren't I? Well, we'll go through the rest of this next week. But we made quite a bit of ground. We covered a lot of ground. But we're going to see that this is exact instructions, and they're perfect instructions for this inventory. Thank you all.
Thank you, Ray.
Thanks, Ramey.
Thank you, Ramey.
Thank you, Ray.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Ray.
Ray.
Bye.
Thank you, Ray.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ray.
Thank you, Ray.
Thanks, Ray.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Ray.
Ray.